Politico is reporting, quote, Biden intends to initially address the verdict in a White House setting, not a campaign one, to show his statement isn't political, according to the people who were granted anonymity to discuss internal deliberations.
The term election interference means different things to different people, but when there are clear examples of unethical behavior being undertaken, or if not unethical, sly and trickster-like behavior being undertaken by someone, it ought to be called out no matter what party you belong to and no matter who you wish to win the 2024 presidential elections. And I am here to submit to you that in this video, I'm going to demonstrate that Joe Biden is actually committing some of the greatest instances of election interference that we've seen in a long while, whether it be, and I'll go into some of these examples later, deploying Robert De Niro to do a press conference outside of Trump's trial, whether it be trying to change the rules of the upcoming presidential debates to give himself an advantage, whether it be preferentially mobilizing his federal government when he got into office to increase the voter registration rules to include more Democrats, incidentally, than they would include Republicans naturally. Whatever it is, this president is one of the most interventionist people when it comes to elections. But before we get started, my friends, hello. I am Christian Watson. I am your host right here. Thank you for being here so much. If you would do one thing for me before we get started, if you would subscribe and also perhaps click the like button, I would appreciate it. If you enjoy philosophical commentary on social and political issues, this is the channel to be. We're going to be pensive, we're going to save the republic, and I promise you, we're going to be able to see through the nonsense that happens to pervade our senses as political observers, and most importantly, as thinking Americans. So as I alluded to, my friends, Joe Biden is engaging in quite a few instances of election interventionism that are going under the radar in terms of seeing them as election interference, primarily because many people are not connecting the dots, or if they are connecting the dots, they're not doing so in a fruitful way. And also because Joe Biden, like many people in power, is using a very sly turn of hand to do things that seem innocuous, but in all reality, if you see them as a part of a broader project, are most certainly sinister. Let's go to the Trump trial. So Donald Trump is currently on trial for this supposed hush money case. There's many people that are addressing the trial. Personally, I think the trial is unfounded and it's rests solely in supposition and other things that are just, I think, well covered by other people. But regardless of if the trial's legitimacy or not, a trial is meant to be an integral part of the American legal system. The American legal system subsists upon two principles. The principle of justice, which is a universal principle, which goes towards all Americans in securing their rights and their contracts and also aggressing grievous harms. And then the second principle is the principle of impartiality, which gives credence and validity to the legal system in a civil and free society. And Biden is challenging both of those principles by quite clearly trying to capitalize and politicize what should be a neutral process. So many folks say to me, oh, Christian, you're a constitutional conservative. You believe that neutral institutions are important for a republic, but the institutions cannot be neutral. Well, the problem is the institutions were initially neutral, but they were hijacked by power interests who absolutely hated the founding generation's principles, absolutely hated the ethos that rests at the core of so many different American institutions, which is basically classically Republican virtue, and they sought to destabilize those emotional generation forces to push forth tyrannical projects imported from Europe, i.e. the Prussian system, which is that's the tradition that Joe Biden is a part of today, where everything in society is totalized under the specter of power and nothing is separate from the government's purview. That is in defiance to what this country was founded upon. That is in defiance to the idea of the private and the public. And when the president sends Robert De Niro, an actor, by the way, I actually like Robert De Niro. I know I'm a young guy, I'm 24, so I'm not supposed to really know who he is, but I actually like Robert De Niro. I think he's a great actor. But he sends Robert De Niro, I've lost respect for him after this, to go say some of the craziest things outside of a trial. Watch.
Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you, No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave.
The issue is not that Robert De Niro has opinions. The issue is not that Robert De Niro happens to voice his opinions on behalf of Joe Biden. The issue is that Robert De Niro is a part of a political project to politicize what should be a fundamentally neutral process. And by that process not being neutral, the integrity of the system being compromised. Now, you pin this Robert De Niro situation with Joe Biden, the announcement of Joe Biden that I showed you in the beginning of the video, going to speak about the Trump trial at the White House. So he's going to give his commentary about, again, what should be a neutral and impartial process at the White House while he is a presidential candidate and in a political environment. This is absolutely, not only is it bad optics, it just shows that the integrity and the sacrosanct nature of the judicial process in America has become so watered down, it's become so diluted, and it is not respected. But if it's not respected by the masses, it should at least be respected by the president, because the president is the chief custodian of the government. But even the president refuses to respect it. And by refusing to respect it and inserting himself into these matters, he is intervening in the election in a grievous way. And I'll tie this together for you in a moment as well as we continue. The next thing I think that Biden is doing to intervene in the election, it doesn't seem as egregious, but it is. It's by him trying to change the rules of presidential debates. Normally, presidential debates have audiences and they have all kind of different rules and settings, and they are hosted by multiple forums. Normally, they're hosted by the Commission on Presidential Debates. They select a host independently, and they put him up there to have the debate. Well, Biden demanded that CNN and other legacy media outlets hosted the debate. He demanded that there be no audience. He demanded so many different things to restrict the scope and the possibilities of where the debate could go that would give himself an advantage. He's intervening in the election by trying to manipulate the system to change the expectations of people. Let me tell you guys about this, because in order to understand how this is election interference, I have to take you towards the realm of expectation. So, in a classically Republican system, expectation and how the public deems certain things are the lifeblood of if certain political situations, whether they be policies or institutions, actually continue. A republic requires a thinking people, not just a virtuous people, but a thinking people to continue its processes. A civil society requires a thinking people to keep it civil, and thinking is indelibly shaped by expectations. Power and status form legitimacy in the minds of men, and therefore, power and status can shape expectations in the hearts of men. Here's the thing. I don't have to get you to believe what I say. If I can stand near something or stand within something that you trust, that you deem as well, I can then use that something to make you go along with my agenda. That's what oftentimes happens. That's why the mainstream media has been so prominent and popular despite the abuses that they have done against the public. Whether it be working with the FBI and the CIA and operations like COINTELPRO or Mockingbird or whatever to go against certain movements like the Vietnam War, whether it be deliberately running cover for the pharmaceutical companies during COVID, whether it be deliberately running cover for the war lobby during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. I don't care what it is. The media has been complacent in the moral degeneration of our society. And one of the reasons why people still kept going and trusting and watching CNN is because the legitimacy within their mind, the status was weaponized against them. Okay, so what does Biden do? Biden uses that same principle to make people have different expectations about how the debate should go and how the debate should be judged. See, debates in a sane society are judged by the substance of what the debaters talk about and how well both of them do in responding to each other's arguments and ultimately finding the truth. How can you check for that without any external variables there within the actual debate? Having an audience isn't a sure way to ensure that when people are telling the truth, obviously, but it helps. It's a correction mechanism, so on and so forth. Having elaborated speaking times isn't a sure way, but it's a correction mechanism. Biden is trying to change the expectations of our voters through sly sleights of hand that benefit him and clearly go to the detriment of his opponent. That is election interference. I can keep going on and on and on. I mean, as I mentioned, Biden at the beginning of his administration opened up an effort to mass register people, which, by the way, it's not a bad thing for people to be registered to vote. But you must understand, when a Democrat administration is overseeing an effort to mass register people, what oftentimes happen is Democrats or whatever political party is in power preferentially recruit people who are of their same party. So when you have political appointees at the head of all these different agencies that are tasked to increase the vote, it's a scheme that cannot be divorced from the political. Once again, it is a form of election interference. Let's talk about the TikTok people for a second. Biden's 50-cent army, so to speak. People like Carrie Sasan and Chris Mowry, who Biden has deputized, and Luke Beasley. He's deputized these young influencers, Gen Z influencers, on TikTok and YouTube to go and speak his message without any critical thinking, without anything, just to speak and literally tout his message to appeal to you, the voters. The student loan forgiveness programs were a form of election interference because Biden is trying to use a process that he was not constitutionally or morally granted to sway the votes and sway the minds of people who are in a demographic that he desperately needs, because right now, Gen Z is trending towards Trump 2 points ahead of Biden. This is massive election interference. The consequences are not only weaponizing expectation against the thinking man, which are most certainly a bad thing, but the consequences are also the perpetuation and the acceleration of de-Americanization. That's a new one you probably haven't heard before. Now, we're going to talk about de-Americanization in a future video. But my thesis is that America has been under a political and a social dark ages from 1930 onwards, where progressives have taken the lifeblood of our country. They have rephrased it in decidedly anti-American, un-American terms. And they have convinced an entire generation of people of political truths that are actually mistruths that actually harm the preservation of American society, like the necessity of welfare, for example, the so-called necessity, like the necessity of having the expert class dictate policy, which, by the way, is still a line that progressives are using to this day, like the necessity of charity coming from the government, not from the community, like the necessity of all these different things, of anti-discrimination law, where goodwill must be cultivated by the barrel of a gun and not by people living in a society who learn to love each other as being a human requires. That is what this Dark Ages has done. It has created all these different concepts, sealed the Overton window tight, and it has had politicians on both parties and both sides, in some way, shape, or form, pay lip service to these concepts. It's my belief, of course, that Trump is the antidote. This is not even a partisan point. It's just one that I think is evident to anyone who is a political observer. He is the antidote to this kind of thinking, because he blew the hinges off of the Overton window and let thoughts that were suppressed, that were just bound up and contained up, come back into the conversation. And thus now there's more ideas and there's more of a return to foundational thinking than there was over the past 50 or 60 or 70 years. He succeeded where many conservative politicians failed. And I'll go more into that in the de-Americanization video. But Biden is continuing this de-Americanization by, again, challenging the impartiality of our institutions, by changing expectations through sleights of hand, by doing these things that are just fundamentally un-American, that are fundamentally antithetical to the spirit of our constitutional republic, and also, in my opinion, are attempts to manipulate people to win. My friends, election interference should not be tolerated from anyone. It should not be tolerated if it is truly election interference. If it's asking questions, that's different. But if it's doing these kind of political Machiavellian tactics to procure a certain end from a particular process, then I say that person has no ethics, and that person, in my opinion, should be called out for their misbehavior, which is what I'm doing today. We should call out everyone for their misbehavior, no matter how much we might idolize them or like them, because right is right, wrong is wrong, morality is universal and objective, not subjective, and you should place a moral truth over your own political expediency. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe. Do whatever you can to get this message out there. If you want to support me, donate, all that good stuff. Everything that you need is in the comment section down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.